Sean, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and switch screens and make you presenter.
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, everyone, have a great session. And as always, it's being recorded and will be available on our website by the end of the week. So please check back if you want any recap or anything.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Rachel. Well, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sean Harrison, and I am going to present just an introduction demonstration on using containers in SSIS packages. So I'd like to thank you all for showing up to my webinar. I am an SSIS and SSRS trainer with Pragmatic Works, and I'm just going to go through this just a nice presentation for you. All right, so using containers in SSIS, the containers in SSIS are very useful. Of course, that's why they're there. And the first thing we'd want to talk about is why would you want to use containers? What is the purpose for using them? Well, one of the big reasons for using containers is for organization. So it will help you keep your packages organized. Of the 3 different containers you have, we have also a sequence container, which has really more uses than what it's intended for, and one of those is for keeping your package organized. So in a lot of cases, you may have a very elaborate SSIS package. You could have many different data flows that are used for doing different things. Well, in a lot of cases, using something like a sequence container is good just to keep the package organized, just so you know, okay, this section over here is used for loading data into these databases. We have this other section over here, which is used for mainly for some data cleansing. So even if you don't have tasks that you're trying to keep in order, it's just good for organization, just so that you know these tasks are over here for this, and this part of the package over here is used for this. Also, prevent package tasks from completing out of order. So that's a big one. You may have certain tasks that may not have to be connected to each other in your control flow, but you do require to have these tasks complete or these data flows complete before the rest of the package can continue. So things that may just run in parallel, but you want them to be completed before anything else in the package. Also, it's really going to cut down on redundant work. So taking these tasks and putting them into containers will really cut down on the amount of headache that's caused. Hence the picture down here in the corner. So it really cuts down on redundant work because of different containers you can use to basically loop through items and loop through certain tasks. So it's really going to cut down on having to repeat the same set of tasks over and over again when you can just throw one set of tasks into something like a for loop or a for each loop and then just have it repeat. So we have 3 different types of containers that we're going to look at in today's presentation. First, we have the sequence container that I mentioned, which the main purpose of the sequence container is just to ensure that all of your tasks execute in a specific order. So with SSIS, one of the ways that you'll normally hear the control flow referred to is your order of operations, basically. Well, taking a sequence container and using that inside of your control flow is basically like putting an order of operations inside of an order of operations. So kind of like when you're working with a math equation and you have to follow the order of operations and you throw some into parentheses. So that's basically like a sequence container. You're just making sure that you're following a specific order, but then inside of that container you have more tasks that also have to follow a specific order. All right, and my GoToMeeting toolbar is just getting a little out of control here. All right, so next we also have the for loop. Now, the for loop is going to repeat tasks in a specified number of times or until something evaluates to false. So if you have a set of actions that need to be repeated over and over again, this is when you're going to use a for loop. And then finally, we have the for each loop. Now, the for each loop is going to loop through multiple objects. So you could have this looping through multiple files, multiple XML nodes, SMO objects. There's a few things that you can actually have the for each loop actually looping through. And this would be used for things, such as, say we have all these files over here that need to be loaded into a database. Well, instead of having to go and create, 5 different data flows just to get all these files in, you can use a for each loop container. So again, that's going to cut down on the amount of redundant work that you're doing. All right, so let's jump into a demonstration. And what you're seeing here is a result of our last foray into extreme data warehousing. Didn't work out too well. All right, so going into bids, and I'm just going to throw together, I just have just a sample package here, and we're just going to throw together some examples of how you would use these different containers inside of SSIS. Now, inside of your SSIS environment, inside your control flow, you'll see right up here that we have our containers. All 3 of them right here, our for loop container, our for each loop container, and the sequence container. Now, you can only use containers inside of your control flow. You'll notice that we don't have containers inside of your data flow, inside of a data flow task. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out, just to show you some things to look out for, let me first bring out a few script tasks. All right, so see we have some script tasks here. They're just empty script tasks. I'm not really going to fill them with anything. Now, I had mentioned that there are only 3 containers. And the sequence container can normally be used for doing some organization as well. Well, there's also one other thing that you want to be aware of. If I right-click out here inside of my control flow, or actually, if I highlight these 4 script tasks here, and just right-click on one, you'll see right here in our context menu, we have the option to group. So I'm going to do that real quick, just to show you something here, just to give you an idea of something. So I'll click Group, and you'll see it puts a group around these tasks. And it looks just like a container. But there are some differences, some major differences. If I bring out a sequence container, we'll just compare it to a sequence container. It looks just like a container. You can minimize the entire group just as you can a container. And then expand it again. But one thing that you'll also notice about the grouping in the container is if you look real close here. Well, let me zoom out on that. Zoom back in. If you look real close, you can see that the group is a dotted line, whereas the container is not. Now, one of the major differences about this is, let's just say we have, let's connect all these tasks here inside of our grouping. So I have all of these grouped together. Let's just say I bring in another one, another script task, for instance. If I want to connect this, I'd connect it, from one of the tasks inside of that group. And I can connect it out to our other script task, for instance. Now with a sequence container, grab some script tasks and drag those in. And we'll just throw another one right out here. With a sequence container, you'll see I can connect the tasks inside of the container. But if I try to grab this one here and connect it outside of the container, it's going to throw an error. So you cannot connect items from inside a container to outside of the container. you actually have to connect the entire container. So one thing that this is going to cause, one thing that this means is that, say I execute everything in this group. If something, if something fails in the group, then of course it's going to stop the whole package. Inside the container, if something inside the container fails, then the whole container is going to fail, and it's going to stop the package. Now, there's another thing that you might also be noticing right now if you're looking at these. When you drag out a task, if you drag a task out here from your toolbar into your package, it's just going to name it whatever it is, for instance, script task, and then it's going to increment it, script task 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But you'll notice inside of a sequence container, like right here, it actually allows to repeat the names. So we have script task 1 and 2, just like over here. So that's something you want to be aware of. And also, as a best practice, you should be renaming all of your tasks anyway. Because if we had 5 or 6 different sequence containers in one package, and we weren't renaming our tasks, let's just say we go and deploy that package out to a server somewhere, and script task 2 fails and kills the package. Well, you have 6 different script tasks that are all named script task 2 because of your sequence containers. So that's one thing you want to be aware of, and you want to make sure that you are that you're renaming those tasks. You're just being careful with that. So another thing too that you're going to notice with containers, as opposed to a group, you have the only other thing you can really do with a group is just ungroup. But when it comes to a sequence container, let's just say we wanted to test something out inside our sequence container. You'll notice if you right-click in the context menu, you have the ability to only execute the container. So that's something that is rather useful with sequence containers. So I could just go and execute the container. Let's see, the container executes, and if I can close out this watch window, the container executes and nothing else below it does. So that's another way that it's good to use for organization. So even if you don't have tasks that need to operate in a specific order, it is good for organization, just keeping things clean and being able to test your packages in specific ways. So I'm going to delete this group, which I can just click on delete. And this is another thing to be aware of. If you delete the group, it's going to delete everything inside of the group. Just as it would with a container. If we delete, where'd it go? Delete the sequence container, it's going to wipe out everything inside of that container. Now again, the grouping, the way I got to that is when you bring tasks out here, and you highlight them and right-click, you'll see the option to group. That's the only way that you can get the grouping to show up. Your actual real containers are all stored right here in the toolbox. So let me just throw together a quick scenario using a sequence container, just so you can see how something like this would work. Let's just say we have 2 different SQL tasks here. And I'm just going to bring in some data flow tasks as well. So I'll have 2 different data flow tasks. All right, so in my execute SQL task, let's just say I'm truncating a table of some sort. So I'm just going to set up a connection. It's a basic connection to my AdventureWorks 2008 R2 database. And I'm just going to truncate a table. That's all I'm going to do here. Let's see, we'll just say truncate table. Let me see what table names I have here. Let me just fire up Management Studio real quick. I do have some tables used specifically for this. And databases, AdventureWorks 2008 R2. See some tables. Here we go. File load table, and looping table. That'll work. So file load table. All right. Okay, so just a simple truncate statement. And let's connect it up to a data flow. And in this data flow, let's just say I'm actually loading some files into a database. So I'll just bring in a flat file source. I'm going to create a new connection manager. And, oh, I actually have a folder I'm looking for right here. So I'll just grab one of these text files. Let me set my delimiter. Just make sure everything looks okay. Okay, everything looks fine. Columns, all right. And I'm going to throw this into just an OLDB destination. Well, let me find my destinations here. All right, destination, if I can remember my alphabet this morning. OLDB destination, there we go. So we're just going to load this into a database. That's all we're going to do here. And let's see, what did I call that? That was the file load table. Check our mappings. Everything's good. One other thing I want to do, just to make sure that everything goes smoothly. There we go. I know I have some data in there that doesn't agree with the table. All right, so we have that one set up. Next one, I'm just going to do, let's see, just going to grab that same connection, the AdventureWorks 2008 R2 connection. And this one, I'm just going to truncate one of these other ones. Let's see, we'll just go ahead and truncate the looping table. That's fine. We can do that. So truncate table. Looping table, I believe, is what it was called. Just double check that. Yep, looping table. Okay, that's fine. So again, just another truncate statement. Right, going to connect it up to this data flow, and in this data flow, let me just bring in, let's see, another flat file source, because we're going to grab another one of these flat files. Create a new one. And let's call this file load 2. Okay, let's grab this file right there. Set my delimiter and my column names, make sure everything's good. All right, we're okay. And let me grab the OLDB destination. And for this one, for this table, we're just going to take that looping table. Check our mappings. Everything is okay there. And again, let me just fix our error output. All right, so I have these two sets of tasks here. The set of tasks. I have the truncate statements that need to run before I actually load data into these databases. Well, then I might have some things further on down the list, but I have to make sure that these finish before anything else does. Because, you know, maybe this is important to the rest of the package. Well, this is where the sequence container comes in handy. I can just bring in my sequence container and grab all of these and drag them over. So now I have them all inside of my sequence container. And then I might have something out here like another data flow or something that's going to come after this. So now if I execute this package, and granted I configured everything correctly, you can see everything executes before this does. So, you know, everything's great. Now, what if there was an issue? Just to show you where this really comes in handy. Let's just say we had, let me actually copy this out, just in case I need it later. Now let's just say we had something was wrong with your SQL statement. So we try to execute this package. You'll see that that execute SQL statement fails. So that, in turn, fails out the container. And you'll notice that nothing else below that container will continue. And this is why the sequence container is really, really useful. Because of the fact that, let's just say you didn't have this inside of a sequence container. You didn't have it in a container. You know, you had these tasks, they had to get completed before anything else, but you have a failure here, but maybe you had some other tasks hooked up to this data flow task. So then even though this fails and it's important for the rest of the package, everything else down this line is going to keep going. So then that's just going to make more work for you on your part to go back and reset a bunch of things, do whatever you need to do to fix that. Then fix your execute SQL task and try it again just to see if you can get it working. So, and also you can see what was successful inside the container and what was not successful inside the container. So this is when the sequence containers are very, very useful. So I think in most packages, especially in the much larger packages, it's always a good idea to use the sequence containers, if for nothing else, just for organization. Let me just stop executing that package. All right, so that's the sequence container. That's one of the big uses of the sequence container. I'm just going to go ahead and wipe all of these out. Okay, and let me also, I'll just get rid of these file connections as well, so we're going to create some new ones a little bit later. All right, so I'm going to keep this connection. And the next one we're going to look at is the for loop container. Now, the for loop container, what this does is it actually loops through your tasks a set number of times, or until something evaluates to false. So when you're looking at this, if we go in and edit this container, it's very simple to use. There's actually only 3 things that you need to set here. And it's right here in your for loop properties. And what we have is you first have your init expression. So this is your starting value of your variable. Because, oh, that's one thing I forgot to mention. With the for loop container, it does require the use of a variable. So in your for loop properties, you have the init expression or initial expression. This is the starting value of your variable. So this is where you specify, what that starting value is. Next, you have the eval expression. This is what it has to evaluate to cause the loop to stop, when it's going to finish. And then you have the assign expression. And this is how you're going to specify how that value is, how the value is increased, how that variable is used. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and create a variable. All right, so let me jump over to variables and make sure I'm scoping this at the package level. I'm just going to create a simple variable here, and I'm just going to call it int count. So int count. Again, that's another best practice, putting that int in the beginning of my variable, so I know that it's just going to be an integer value. So int32, that's fine. And the value, we're just going to leave it 0. So that's fine. I don't need to do anything else to that. Now, let me throw a task or 2 in here. And also increase, there we go. So I'm just going to throw some script tasks in here, just some empty script tasks. And in the for loop container, here's where we're actually going to configure this. So we have your initial expression. This is, again, where we're going to specify the starting value of our variable. So all I have to do is use the @ symbol, @int count equals 0. So we're just saying that we're going to start off with a value of 0. Then we have our eval expression. So all we have to say here is @int count is less than 5. So what we're saying is as long as that variable value is less than 5, then the loop can keep going. And then we have the assign expression. So here's how we're going to determine how the value is added to this variable. So all we do here is we just say @int count is equal to, or equals, @int count plus 1. So we're saying that at each iteration of this loop, we're taking the value of the variable, and we're just adding 1 more to it. Okay? Now, if there was a problem with any one of these, you would see an error message down here. So just just for example, let's just say I didn't finish this expression. You can see it's going to throw a warning down here at the bottom, basically telling you that, there's an error, no expression to compute. So basically it's telling us that the expression's wrong for some reason. Should have copied that instead. So equals at int count. Let me just throw it back in here. +1. Okay, and you'll see the error goes away now. So we're good. So all of our expressions should work. Okay, so we'll just click OK. Now if I executed this package right now, since I only have a bunch of empty script tasks inside of it, you'll see it flashes for a little bit. Probably doesn't flash very much since you're watching it through GoToWebinar, and it's finished. You don't really see very much. So what I want to do here is show you how this is really working. We're going to slow it down, and we're going to do that by using a breakpoint on this container. So I just right-click my container, and we'll just go to Edit Breakpoints. This is normally used for some troubleshooting techniques, just so you can watch the different loops and other events. But I'm just going to use this to show you how this is actually working. To show you that it is adding to that variable, and that it is cycling through those tasks. So when you're editing breakpoints or setting breakpoints on a container, or anywhere really, you'll notice you have all these different break conditions. Well, the one that I'm interested in here is the last one. Break at the beginning of every iteration of a loop. Okay, so I'll just check that. Okay, now you'll see that we have a breakpoint. Okay, so now that we have our breakpoint, I'm just going to right-click over here and execute that package again. So you see that it stops. It's going to stop right there. So it hasn't executed anything yet. It started. So now that it's stopped like this, we can go up to debug, the debug option up here in the toolbar. Just click on that, and we're going to look at the variable by using a watch window. So under debug, you'll have windows and you'll have watch. You can also use locals. I just prefer to use watch. And I'm going to open up watch 1. So we have one window here. So we want to take a look at this variable. Now, we're going to just type it in here. All we have to do is type in the variable. One thing to be aware of, though, and this is really just more of a little extra bonus information on using variables and breakpoints, you have to type it in the way that variable was originally created. So if you remember, I used int count with capital C. If I did this with a lowercase c and click away from it, you can see it's not recognizing it. So it is case sensitive here. So let me go back, and there we go, int count. There we go. So you'll see right now, we've started the package, but you'll see right now that the current value is 0. Okay, so I'm going to click the button to continue. You'll see it loops through once, and you'll also notice right down here that the value of that variable has increased to 1. And you can see it loops through it again. So if I continue, it's going to loop through again, and the value switches to 2, and then 3, and then 4, and it checks it again, and it can't continue because it cannot be equal to or greater than 5. So it stops right there. All right. So stop debugging. So you can see that the for loop container, again, very simple to use. It just goes through, cycles through a number of, whatever you have in here. It's going to cycle through it the amount of times that you specify. So not too bad. All right. So one more container to take a look at. And hopefully I'm not going too fast through this. So let's delete our for loop container. And now we're going to take a look at the for each loop container. So the for each loop container. The for each loop container, again, this is used to cycle through a number of items, like files or SMO items, SMO objects, things like that. So let's just say, for an example, for a scenario, that I have multiple files that I need to load into one particular database table. I mean, I don't want to have to sit here and drag out, okay, this is for the first file, this one's going to be for the next file, and then this one, and then this one, and so on and so forth. Because then I have to go into each one of these data flow tasks, create the source and destination, and then, what if I actually mess it up on one of those? What if I do something wrong in one of the data flows, and I'm executing this package, it gets almost all the way through, but something was messed up with the way the data flow was put together, so I have to fix it and go back and do it again. Well, this is where the for each loop container is, really becomes incredibly useful. In this case, what I can do is I can just have one data flow. So in this data flow task, I'll just use a flat file source. And let me go ahead and create a new one. And I'll just browse through the file. Now, let's just say that I have, and if you notice, if I switch this to all files, I have multiple files in this folder. So, and these text files, these are the ones that I want to load. I have an XML and XSD. I might have some other stuff in here too, but I just want the text files, these .txt files. I'm just going to grab the first one. So it's all I'm going to need is grab the first one. And of course, set my formatting options here. Take a look to make sure everything's good. Okay. And then I want to put that into my database table. So I'm loading them all into the same database. So I'll just grab the, where did it go? Oh, OLDB destination. It's right there on it. And I'll just grab one of these tables. I can just grab that looping table. That's fine. Sure, my mappings are good. Yep, everything's good there. And this is all I really need as far as my data flows. I'm loading all of these files into the same database, and I'm just going to do it with one data flow. So what I have to do is drag this and drop it right into our for loop container. And here's where we start to configure the for loop container. Now, with the for each loop. Now, with the for each loop container, you saw the for loop container only required just one simple variable. Well, with the for each loop, you actually have to use a variable and get into a little bit of expressions. So you're using both variables and expressions. It's not that bad though. It's pretty easy to do. So we'll just go into our for each loop editor, and everything you have to really do is right here in the collection and variable mappings tab. So just those two tabs. First off, you have your for each loop enumerator. So by default, it's going to be set to for each file enumerator, which is what we're concerned with here, because we're looping through files. But there are a few different things here. You have an item enumerator, also an ADO enumerator. So if you're looping through ADO objects as maybe a source, you also have an ADO.NET schema row set enumerator. You can even loop through variables. So for each from variable enumerator. And there's also a for each node list enumerator and an SMO enumerator. So the one that you're generally going to see most of the time would be the file enumerator and probably also the variable enumerator. So a lot of these other ones you may not see very often, if even at all. So again, we're looping through files. We're taking these flat files and putting it into a database. So we're just going to stick with the for each file enumerator. You could also put an expression on that, of course, just like you can everywhere else in SSIS. But we're going to be dealing with expressions in a little bit of a different way. All right, so then we have the enumerator configuration section right down here. Here's the folder. Now, even though in our source, our flat file source, we're pointing it to a file, we still have to tell the for each loop enumerator where those files are coming from, or what folder we're going to be interested in. So just click Browse, and I believe I do have it on my desktop. Yep, I just put it in a folder called Folder. So that's all we need. We're just pointing it to the folder. Underneath that, you have files. Now, by default, you can see it's going to be set to the wildcard for star.star. So basically, by default, it will pull everything out of that folder. But if you remember, I've got text files in there. I've got an XML file, an XSD file. Your scenario, you could have multiple different file types in there. Well, I only want the text files. So I could just set this to star.txt. So it's only going to grab my text files. The next section here is just to how you want to retrieve the file name. So if it's fully qualified, name only, name and extension, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to leave it set to fully qualified. That's fine. You could even choose to traverse subfolders. So you can go through the subfolders as well and grab more TXT files. In my case, I don't have any subfolders. I don't want to do that anyway. All right, so the next tab, you have variable mapping. So here's where we're going to create a variable that's going to store the different file paths for these different text files. Now, I could have created one over here already in my variables pane, in the variables window, or I could just create it from here. I'm just going to go ahead and create it from here. So, new variable. Let's see. Now, for this one, I'm just going to scope it to the package level. It's fine. For the name, I'm going to call this one str file path. So it's just a string variable, and it's going to hold a file path. The value right here, I'm going to leave that blank. I'm not going to fill in any value for this variable because it's the for each loop enumerator, or the for each loop editor, or I'm sorry, the for each loop that's going to take that value and give it to this variable. So, okay. All right, so that's all we need to do. So let's click OK again. So we've configured our for each loop container. But there's still one last thing that we have to do. Right now, that variable we created has no value whatsoever. And we actually want to loop through multiple files, not just one. So we have to come down here to our connection manager that we created for that flat file. And I have to go into the properties of that because I'm going to set an expression on that connection manager. So in my properties, all I need to do is come over here to expressions, and then I have to move my GoToMeeting toolbar because it's in the way. And I'll just click the ellipses right here. So for the property, we're actually going to set an expression on this connection manager. The property we're going to put this on is a connection string. And then our expression is actually going to be pretty simple. The expression is just going to be a variable, and it's going to be that str file path. If I can remember where it went. Let's see, file path, file path. I've got quite a glare on this monitor right here. Here we go, str file path. All right, so if you try to click the evaluate expression button just to test it, of course you're not getting anything there because there's no value for it. This is a variable that has no value, but it's going to fill the value of that connection string. Confusing, isn't it? So we'll just click OK, and OK again. So now we have this thing configured. So what's going to happen here is first that data flow path is going to pick up that first file that we set it to, and it's going to send it into the it's going to send it right into the database, our OLDB destination, into that table. So then the for each loop is basically going to use that that variable to pass in the path to the next file. And it's just going to keep looping through all of them until there's no more left. All right? So again, we're going to use a breakpoint just so we can watch the process. So I'll just right-click and edit breakpoints. I'm going to break at the iteration of every loop. All right, so in the Solution Explorer, oh, and there's one other thing that I almost forgot to do. I want to set up my error outputs again. The only reason that I'm doing this is because there is one particular field somewhere in this data that doesn't agree with one of my columns. So I'm just doing that as a quick fix. All right. So in the control flow, I'm just going to execute the package. Now, remember, you can right-click and you can execute a container. But the reason that I'm not doing that is because one thing you'll notice on the looping containers, if you right-click and execute just the container, it'll only execute once. Even though it's a looping container, it won't loop. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So package, execute package. It's going to stop. And this is our count variable. We can just get rid of that. Oops, I did not want to duplicate that at all. So delete watch. All right. So we'll just add the name of that current file path variable that we're working with. So str file path. Click away, and you can see here's our value. Here's our current value. This is the first file that we chose, the one that ends in 305c.txt. So if I continue, it loaded that first one. You can see it was successful, and then it gets the next one ready. And it takes the value for that variable, now switches to that next file in line, the 305c2.txt. All right, so I can continue on again. You can see it goes to 5c3, and then 5c4, and the loop didn't find any other txt files or text files that we hadn't used yet, so it ends successfully. So it is a little confusing when you think about how that's working, but I can step through it again real quick. First, all we did for our data flow is we just set up a standard data flow task. You know, nothing too elaborate or crazy. But we, let's see, I took just a flat file, just a regular flat file, and I'm sending it into a database table, an LDB destination. Nothing big. Then in that for loop container, I'm looping through files, so I'm telling it that these are files that we're working with. I pointed it to the folder that's containing the, it's containing the file, or the set of files that I'm looking for. And I'm also specifying what type of files those are, because it's the loop here that's doing the majority of the work. And then in my variable mappings, I'm telling it to use this variable, this str file path. So the loop, what's basically is happening here is that the loop is going through the folder and it's looking for these files. It grabs the first one, it puts it into that variable, which in turn, because of the connection manager we have here, or the expression that we have on there, it's basically taking the value for that first file, giving it to that variable, which is then giving it to the connection manager. So then we're connecting to that file and we're loading the data into that table. And once that's done, the loop goes through again, grabs the next file, takes the file path, passes it into that variable again, which the variable gives that path to the connection manager, and then we load that one in. And then it just keeps going on just like that until all of those until all of those files have been loaded. Okay, so not too bad at all. Now you can also get a little more elaborate with these by adding more expressions on your expressions tab on different properties of the actual loop itself. One thing too that you'll notice, and we actually do get questions about this a lot, if you'll notice with the on the collections tab, you have your folder. This is the folder that your files are in. If you're trying to set an expression on that, I just like to point this out normally. If you're trying to set an expression on that, you'll see that here it's referred to. Let's see, where did it go? It's actually referred to as. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, look at that. It's not even in here. It's not what I'm looking for. Condition description disable. For each enumerator. Oh, okay. Actually, not what I was looking for. So disregard that. So there are certain parts of it, though, that apparently you cannot set expressions on. All right. So that is my introduction demonstration on using containers inside of SSIS and how it's really going to make things a lot easier for you. So again, just to recap, we took a look at the sequence container, which again, it's a really good idea to get into the habit of using that for organizational purposes, if nothing else. Then the for loop container, which actually cycles through a set number of tasks until the expression evaluates to false, or basically tells it to stop. And also the for each loop container, which uses variables and expressions to make really cut down on your redundant work. Kind of makes the package more dynamic for you when you're working with multiple files or items. All right, so that is all that I have for you today. Here's my contact information. I blog quite, I do blog quite a bit on vidn.com, and also you can contact me by email, and also follow me on Twitter if you'd like. Every once in a while, I do say something that's possibly quite useful.
You can also follow our free training site on Twitter at PW3Training.
Ah, yes, yeah. I should have added that as well.
That's cool. All right, we have a couple questions that we can get through before our time runs out. The first one is, how can you give sequence numbers to tasks within the container?
Ooh, good question. Sequence numbers to a task inside of a container?
Yep.
Ah, I see. Well, I would assume this is based mainly on the sequence container. One thing that you can't do is actually give it a sequence number. Say, for instance, I have my sequence container here, and I have tasks that, source and script tasks, I just drag those out here. See that I have some tasks that aren't necessarily tied to each other or need to run one after, don't have any kind of relationship. I still can't give it a sequence number. The only thing I can do to make sure that one runs after the other is to connect it with the precedence constraints. So it wouldn't have to be a success in this case if that's what you're interested in. It could just be a completion. I could set to a completion, and that way they'll just make sure that they finish one after the other. However, keep in mind, though, that even though this is only set to a completion, if that task fails, it will still fail out the entire container.
Okay, great. William would like to know, can I use SQL statements?
And if...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, William would like to know, can I use SQL statements in the expressions in the for loop containers?
Oh, inside the for loop container. Let's see, let me bring that out. So to use a SQL statement, can you repeat that question again, Rachel? Sorry.
I really wish I could, but I just erased it.
Oh, okay.
So,
well,
I think
yeah,
you can
because
see it in
using
your question box, though.
Oh, yeah, I'm having problems with my question box. It's kind of weird.
Interesting.
It doesn't really show me what it's supposed to. But using SQL statements, though, inside of the configuration, if it's this section here that you're referring to, unfortunately, it isn't going to handle SQL statements here. It's only going to handle expressions. So, yeah, you're stuck to using expressions here.
Okay. We have another question from Eugene. Could you use the for each loop to loop through databases opposed to files? What would be different in the database connection?
That was the for each loop you said?
Right.
Okay. With the for each loop, if you wanted to do something like that, you definitely could. You may, in that case, would want to set let's see, if you could use it with a from variable enumerator. So say you have a database source, like a table source, you could be pulling those values from variables. So it will just pass those variables into your connection manager. Or, of course, if it's an ADO enumerator, if you're working with an ADO data source or object. You'll also notice too that as I choose these different options here, you're going to see that the configuration changes as well. So you're going to have some different things to configure. With variable enumeration, all you do is just choose the variable. So that could be the way to go with databases. Is just say if it's a source you're looking for, just grab your connections value from variables and just choose that variable here. So then it will just loop through each one and toss it right into where it needs to go.
Okay, we have another question from Doug. Can you please explain the syntax of the variables, such as in one example you used @int count in the watch window, and the other you used user : str file path.
Ah, okay, absolutely. With the watch windows, actually, let's see if I can. Let me do it this way. Let me get rid of these two. With the watch windows, let's just say I execute this. You'll see right here, it does show the full name of the variable. So the str file path. If I delete this, basically what this is it fills that in for you. So when I was looking for it, all I had to type in was str file path. I didn't have to use the namespace abbreviation at the beginning, because you'll notice when I click off of it, it fills in the rest for you. So that's just something that the watch windows will add by themselves.
Oh, that's very convenient. Okay, we have a couple more questions. Regina would like to know, how would you put the files into different tables using a for each loop?
Ah, good question. That is a really good one. That would be a little bit more complicated, because what we'd end up having to do is we would have to use, let's see, inside our data flow task, because the loop is going to grab the source, basically. So the for each loop is used for looping through the source. If we wanted to put these into different database tables, that's when we would have to get into using some expressions on your connection manager for the for the OLDB destination. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Couldn't think of how you would set that up. You would have to create another variable for that, and then use some expressions. But I'll have to look into that one actually. That's a good question though.
And I'm sure you can post on your blog later.
Oh yes, absolutely. It gives me great blog material.
There you go. Thanks, guys. All right, our last question for today is from Nicole. Where would you enter expression data so that you could loop through files in a folder up to a certain file name and then stop or break?
Ooh, loop through files up to a specific file name.
Right, and then stop and break.
And then stop. Oh, wow.
It's a hard question.
Yeah, that is a pretty tough one. Let's see.
That might be another blog one, Sean.
That's probably going to be another. Yeah, I'm going to have to research that one. That one is going to be another one. Because one thing that you will notice is in the for each loop. Let's see, where'd it go? In the when you're configuring it, you can't actually enter any kind of expressions here in this file field. So if we went to, say, expressions in your properties here, you'll also see that there's nothing for file here. You do have the, let's see, where'd it go? That's just the for each enumerator. Okay. Yeah, that's one I'll definitely have to look into, because it doesn't even look like when you're trying to set expressions on the task itself. There's nothing here for the for that field, for that file field.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and thank you, Sean, for an amazing presentation. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but feel free to email Sean or send him a question on his blog. He will be sure to respond. He's really good about that. So once again, this session has been recorded and will be available on our website by the end of the week, by the end of tomorrow. And everyone have a great week, and thank you again, Sean.
You're very welcome. Thanks everyone for showing up, and I'll just throw this back up here if anyone needs it.
All right, thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry.